Welcome back. We come now to the last form of inductive inference we'll be exploring, namely analogy. In an analogy, we are arguing on the basis of likeness or similarity. It's really a comparison in the sense that we're finding similarities rather than differences. Remember, when we compare, we find likenesses. When we contrast, we find differences. Reasoning by analogy always involves likenesses. So when we reason analogically, we proceed from the observation that two or more things are similar in some respects to the conclusion that they're probably similar in some other respect as well. Formalized, it looks like this. X is similar to Y in some specific ways, namely A, B, and C. X has an additional feature, D. Therefore, most likely, Y also has the feature D. And here's an example. Premise 1, Nicole's car, a 2010 Ford sedan, is expensive to run. Premise 2, Laverne's car is a 2010 Ford sedan, and it's expensive to run. Premise 3, Jessica's car is a 2010 Ford sedan. Conclusion, so Jessica's car will be expensive to run. As you can see, we've found similarities in the first two cases. The vehicles are from the same manufacturer, Ford, are the same model, sedans, and the same year, 2010, and they're expensive to run. Since the third case, Jessica's automobile shares the relevant features, that is, it's a 2010 Ford sedan, we can conclude by analogy that it's also expensive to run. Let's examine the factors we should look for when constructing good analogical arguments. First, identify as many analogous features, likenesses or similarities, as possible. Second, be aware of the dissimilarities, and if these predominate, then the analogy will fail. Third, make sure that the likenesses are relevant to your conclusion. If I try to argue that a car can fly because it shares certain features with a jet fighter, like an engine, seats, and a windshield, my argument won't get very far because the likenesses aren't relevant to my hypothesis. Finally, don't try to push an analogy too far. Stick to obvious likenesses and similar cases. There's a well-known standardized assessment instrument known as the Miller Analogies Test, the MAT, sometimes used for graduate school admission. Here's a video that shows you how to deconstruct the kinds of analogies that one would find on the MAT. I think you'll find it very useful.
Today we're going to be working our way through analogies. Now, analogies are pretty cool. Here is our first example. We read this as rose is to flower, as hammer is to, represented with four options. The answer is tool. We can see that because a rose is a type of flower and a hammer is a type of tool. Let's look at a few more examples. We're going to read this as up is to down, as left is to what? So when we're doing analogies, we want to analyze the relationship between these first two sets of words. So up and down, they're opposites, so we need to find the opposite of left. Is it right, over, close, or before? Clearly, the answer is right because right is the opposite of left. Next, I can see that our relationship between eyes and see is one of function. Eyes let us see just as fingers let us, is it hear, touch, smell, or taste? Clearly, fingers allow us to touch. We can eliminate the other ones. These are pretty easy. So when we analyze the relationships between words and analogies, we're going to be forming bridges. There's lots of different kinds of bridges, and let's look at the first kind. It's called a function, and let's go through it together. So shovel is to dig, as what is to what? We know that a shovel is used to dig, so let's take a look at these examples. Is a bag used to buy? Nope. A baby is used to cry? No. Cloud is used to rain? No. Is a fork used to eat? Yes, it is. And let's look at the last one. Is a car used to stop? No. Clearly the correct answer is a fork is used to eat. Let's take another, look at another example. It's the lacking bridge. So something that lacks an element means it doesn't have it. So ugly is to beauty as what is to what. So something that's ugly lacks beauty. Let's look at the options. Something that's serious lacks humor. We're going to put a question mark. We might come back to that. Something that's painful lacks happiness? Possibly. Something that's old lacks age? No. Something that's hot lacks heat? No. And something that's sweet lacks strength? No, absolutely not. So we've got two options. Something that's serious lacks humor, and something that's painful lacks happiness. Number 2 is not the correct answer. Number 1 absolutely is. If it's something that's serious, it lacks humor. So for this exercise, we're going to look at an analogy and complete the second half by forming bridges between the words. In this first example, I see that athlete is to fit as what is to what. We've got 4 options, and the bridge type is characteristic. So what that means is a characteristic of an athlete is to be fit. We're going to go through each of these 4 right now. Is a characteristic of a chef to be fat? No. I know lots of thin and fit chefs. Is it characteristic of a dog to be energetic? Nope. I know quite a few lazy dogs. Is it characteristic of a priest to be religious? Yeah, it is. So I'm going to star that. We're going to come back to it. Let's look at the 4th example. Is it characteristic of a dancer to be intelligent? No. Maybe a professor or a doctor, but not a dancer. So characteristic of a priest is to be religious. That is our answer for number 1. For the second kind of analogy, I can see that it's a function. So microwave is to heat as what is to what. So the function of a microwave is to heat food. Let's look at this one. Is the function of a refrigerator to cool food? Is the function of a freezer to cook food? No. I don't know about yours, but my freezer definitely does not cook food. That'd be pretty cool if it did, though. Is the function of a sink to organize? Nope. And is the function of a fireplace to destroy? No, I wouldn't say so. I think the most accurate example in this case is the function of a refrigerator is to cool. And finally, we'll look at the third bridge type, which is characteristic. Comedy is to funny as what is to what. So a characteristic of a comedy is to be funny. Is a characteristic of a mystery to be boring? No. Is a characteristic of a drama to be romantic? I don't think so. And is a characteristic of a tragedy to be sad? Let's come back to it. Let's look at the 4th. Is a characteristic of a newspaper to be expensive? No. Absolutely not. So inherent in sadness, specifically sad stories, we find tragedies. Tragedy is the option. Comedy is to funny, as tragedy is to sad.
Now that you know how analogies are formally structured, let's close with a famous analogical argument from the 17th century, the so-called Watchmaker Argument, which purported to prove the existence of a supreme being, that is, God, based upon the design similarities between a watch and the universe. Here's the reasoning. Premise 1, just as the existence of a watch, which has an intricate mechanical design that produces an intelligent outcome, requires a watchmaker, so the existence of the universe, which also has an intricate mechanical design that produces an intelligent outcome, so it requires a universe maker. Premise 2, the universe exists. Conclusion, therefore, God exists. The terms of the analogy look like this. Watch is to watchmaker as universe is to God. The question is, would you accept this argument? How would you critique it? If we extend the argument, we quickly realize that a watch, once out of the watchmaker's shop, is on its own, so to speak. The watchmaker isn't hovering over it after it's sold. Is this also true of the universe? Or take a more disturbing theological possibility. Watchmakers grow old and die. Is this also true of God? If the analogy is a good one, it's a consequence we would have to reckon with. That's it. We've covered a lot of ground in the past 3 units, but it has been some impressive real estate. You should now feel comfortable drawing inductive inferences based on enumerative inductions, statistical syllogisms, causal arguments, and analogical reasoning. Next up, we'll take a look at what happens when these characteristic kinds of inference go astray. We'll be examining specific kinds of mistakes in reasoning known as fallacies. Until then, best wishes.